Hi everyone, so I've had a few requests to do a video to show how you would deal with saving and then reloading objects that the player creates at runtime. So this was really questions that came out of a tutorial that I did showing you how to do a simple system for making player-built structures. I don't actually have that project on me anymore, that's how long it's been since I did it. So what I've done here and what we'll do in this video is make a simple system where the player can spawn these boxes and spheres like this, and these are just objects that imagine these can be anything you want your player to build. And then the idea is we want to be able to save all these objects so that when we play the game again we can reload these objects, and so whatever the player builds is still there. So if I hit a key combination to save, which I've got a Shift K for some reason in this project, you'll see at the top left that says saved OK. If we then quit and rerun this game, I should be able to hit another key combination, which is Shift L in this case, and that will reload all those objects. So I know everything's where the player left it. So that is what we're going to be doing in this video. It shouldn't be too long really, it's quite a simple system to set up. So first things first, let's set up the way that we can actually place these blocks and spheres in. Now if I remember rightly from the tutorial I did before, we didn't just have one class of object that needed saving, we had like walls and floors and different things you can build. So to kind of mimic that, I'm going to set up a simple hierarchy of to put our block and sphere in, which may be a little bit overkill for what this is, but at least you'll get the idea of how you can save multiple different classes of objects, which you'll need to do if you want to do this to any complexity. So we'll have a new blueprint. It's going to be an actor. I'll call that BP build base, and then we'll give this a static mesh. So add component, static mesh. And then what we'll do is derive this blueprint into two child blueprints that represent the objects that we want to be able to build. Which, as I say, a little bit overkill for what this is, but that's fine. So create child blueprint class, we'll call this BP underscore block. And all we're going to do in here is go and set the static mesh to the cube mesh that comes with the starter contents, well, shape cube actually. There we go, so we're going to be able to create those. And then in a similar way, we want to create another child of BP build base just to be called BP sphere. And then the trick here is when we write the save file out, we need to make it remember which class of object has been created. So BP sphere, the static mesh there will be set to, unsurprisingly, just whatever sphere mesh we've got. Material sphere? No, we'll go with the one that's just plain white sphere. That one. Okay. Now we're going to need to set up some extra keyboard controls. I mean, you could use gamepad controls or whatever you want, so feel free to substitute your own controls in here, but we'll go Edit, Project Settings, go to Input, and we need a couple of buttons for creating those blocks and spheres, and then buttons for save and load. So we'll go Add Action, we'll do Place Block first of all, and I'm just going to put that on the 1 key on the keyboard. I have another action mapping, we'll call this one Place Sphere, and that's going to go on the 2 key on the keyboard. There we go. And then for saving and loading, we'll make another action called Load Player Objects. So this is what we'll press when we want to read the save file and respawn all the objects. And we'll put that on maybe Control L. Shift L, that'll do. And for save objects, you would think S, so Shift S, but because I'm using the first person example, S already moves the characters like walk backwards. If we're using standard WSAD controls. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this on Shift plus the key that's just next to L on my keyboard, which is K. So they're just together. I know K doesn't stand for save or even really appear anywhere in the word, but it's, so what? You can choose your own keys here if you want. Okay, so that done. We will want to make a player controller, just somewhere to put our controls. So new blueprint, player controller, call this BP player controller. Or just, if you're building this into an existing project, use the player controller you've already got going. And we now need to tell Unreal to use that player controller rather than the built-in one. And we'll do that now because I always forget to do this and then wonder why it's not working. So back in the project settings, under maps and modes, under selected game mode, you'll have player controller class, and you can change that to BP player controller, the one that we just made. Right, so the next thing we're going to want to do is we'll deal with our spawning controls first, basically. So open our player controller, go to the event graph, I'll delete the things that are there because we don't need them, and we want to add in those two input events, input actions for placing block and placing sphere. So we've got place block there. We'll also have input action place sphere, and really all we're going to do here is first of all store in a variable which object we want to make, and then these two blueprints will basically converge onto one spawn actor from class. So add a variable, call this something like class to spawn, and that needs to be a variable of type BP build base class. So what that can do is store the class of BP build base itself or anything that inherits from it, which remember block and sphere both do. So in the event we've just pressed the key for place block, we will set class to spawn to be the BP block class. In the event that we've pressed to spawn a sphere, we will set class to spawn to be the sphere, and then all we do here is there's spawn actor from class and place it slightly in front of the player. So spawn actor from class, it will be whatever we've just stored in this variable. Of course, if you want to do away with this variable, you can just have this twice, basically. For the spawn transform, we want to spawn sort of just in front of the player's camera. So for our location, we will do get player camera manager, and then if you ask for the location of that, it basically gives you the player's camera location. So get actor location, since we don't want to spawn right on the camera because that would be intersecting the player's mesh and everything, we will move the spawned object forwards from the camera's location by whichever direction the camera is facing. Yeah, by moving it along whichever direction the camera is facing. So the way you do that is from the player camera manager, you do a get forward, and that will put in an extra node for getting the camera's transform component. So now we've got a vector pointing away from the camera, which will only have a length of 1, so we need to multiply that up by whatever distance we want to offset. So if we do vector multiplied by float, put 500 in there, what we're going to do here then is take the camera's location, add onto that a vector which is basically pointing 500 centimeters away, whichever way the camera is facing, and then that's where we'll spawn the object. So take the camera's location, add this other vector that we've just created onto it, and then that is where we will spawn the object. And just so the objects don't hang in the air, we may as well switch on their physics. So I think that's set simulate physics. Yep, there we go. So we set simulate physics on the thing we've just spawned. Tick that. And as far as I know, we can test that. It should basically work. So let's see. So play. So if I press 1, yeah. Pressing 1 now spawns these blocks. Pressing 2 spawns these spheres. And they should all have physics on them. It will go a little bit crazy if you try to spawn things back to back like that and they start intersecting. So just be careful of that. But anyway, that's our spawning working. So really all we need to do now is make it so that we can save what classes we've spawned and in what positions, what position, rotation, scale, and then have another key to load them all back in again. So we're going to need to create a few more objects in our content browser first of all. We need something to represent an actual save game, and we need a struct to represent like an item that's being saved. I think this will make more sense if I just show you rather than trying to explain it first. So we go new blueprint structure, and we'll call this something like player object details. So all of the blocks and spheres that we're spawning, I'm calling those player objects. So player object details. So when we save an object, we'll create one of these structs, and this struct needs to contain everything that we would need to know to recreate that object when we load it. And we need to know two things. We need to know the class of the object. So we'll make a variable inside the struct called object class, and that will be similar to the variable we made in our spawning blueprint, just it'll be a BP build base class, which again can store the class of BP build base itself or anything that inherits from it. So this is how we will know whether we're saving and loading a block or a sphere. We also need to know how the object is scaled, rotated, and positioned, and that is all what's called the object's transform. So if we make another variable called object transform, and that can be of type transform. So what we'll do when we press save is basically for every object we've spawned, create one of these structs in which we'll record the class of object and record its transform, and then that's what will get written to disk. So with that done, we need the actual save game object itself. So right click, new blueprint class, and then under all classes, search for save game. And you can call this whatever you want, but BP underscore save game I'm going to go with. It's not the most imaginative name, but it's a simple example, and that name's fine. So in here, we need to equip our save game object with everything that we need to save, which for this example is really just an array of this struct. So in the save game, new variable, we'll call this something like player objects, sticking with the same naming we've been using. At least if I try and spell that correctly, there we go. And that is going to be of type that struct, which we just made. What did I call that? Player object details, was it? Player object details, and it needs to be an array. So we're basically storing an entire list of these structs, one for each object. That is all that needs to have. Back in our player controller now, we just need to wire up our last two input actions for loading and saving. So I'll find a bit of space in here, have input action, we'll do save player objects first and then load. So save, what we need to do first of all is create an object of this save game type that we've just made. So that will be create save game. We'll create save game object. What type of save game objects? Think about it, you could have all different, this is the only one we've made, and save game is the one that's built in. But you may have loads of different types of save game for saving, settings, options, player inventory, lots of things. We just want this one for now, but you could have like a whole list to choose from here, depending on your game, obviously. So we'll have BP save game. Then what we need to do is get hold of all of the things that we've spawned. So that will be a get all actors of class. And if we go for BP build base, that will fetch every BP build base or anything that inherits from this, which is what we want. So this will grab all of our spheres and blocks and put them into this array for us. We then loop over that array with a for each loop. And the idea now is for every element in this array, we need to create an entry in that the array that we made in our save game object, in this player objects thing basically. So that will be, let's just drag from over here. We'll get that player objects array, we will add something to it, and what we want to add is one of those structs, because that's what that array is, it's an array of that struct that we made. So the fastest way to do that, I think, is to drag away from this pin on the add, go make player object details, and then this is basically our struct. We need to know two things. What class of objects are we saving? Well, first of all, let's just drag away from this array element on the for each loop and just do a get class. So that will store whether this is a sphere or a block or whatever. And then object transform, again, you can just drag away from this array element and go get transform. I think it's get actor transform, that's it. And that's all that needs to do. We should write out a message, say whether we've saved or not, whether it worked. The other thing is, we've populated this array with all the objects that we want to, with all the information that we want to save, but we haven't actually saved yet. That's the next thing. So once this loop is completed, we can do a save game to slot. We need to point it to our save game object, which is this that we create over here. And we need to give the slot a name. We're just going to call this player objects, or player objects slot. And then again, this is where you would have loads of different like inventory slot, graphics settings slot, whatever you need. What's important is that when we reload the game, we need to say which slot we're loading from, and it has to be spelt the same. So player objects slot. And here we will put in a branch. This save game to slot returns true or false depending on whether the save worked or not. So all we'll do is have a branch that reads this true or false, and we'll do a print string to say saved OK or failed to save. So print string, this one can just say saved OK. Then we'll copy and paste that message box, that print string box, sorry, and off of the false we'll just have like a message like failed to save. That, unless I've missed something, is all we need to do for that. So now loading is basically the exact opposite. So here what we've done is create a save game object, find all the actors in the level that match there are B people based or something that inherits from it, written some information into the save game about each one of those things, and then actually saved it. Now here we can do the reverse, basically, which load the save game, loop over the array in the save file, and recreate all the objects. So down here we'll go input action load player objects. We will do a load game from slot, so it's the opposite of save to slot. And see what I mean here, we need to say which slot we're loading, and it has to be the same. So what I'm just going to do is copy and paste from there so I can't make any mistakes. So we're loading the player objects slot, save game slot. That will return a generic save game object which we need to cast into our type, BP save game. So the very next thing from here, cast to BP save game. And again, in a more complex example where you've got lots of different types of save game, you'd have to cast to the one that was actually saved in that slot, otherwise things would not work out how you want. Now we've got our objects. Well, we've got our save game loaded. We can do a get player object, so that will read this array. Then we'll do a for each on that. So what we need to do is go over all of these player objects, these player object details structs that were in the save file. For each one, we're going to spawn an object of this class and position it here. Well, this won't just be position, transform will be position, rotation, and scale. So we'll go spawn actor from class. Which class do you want to spawn? Whatever that's set to. And what is the transform for this new object? Whatever that's set to. Then we may as well put a couple more message boxes in, say whether we succeeded or failed here. So if I copy and paste that failed to save, from the completed on this loop, if we get this far, we've basically loaded everything okay. So we'll go loaded, okay. If this cast fails for whatever reason, say we've either typed in the wrong slot name here, or we've cached the wrong type of save game, or it was corrupt, or whatever, or say the file didn't exist, then we would have this run, so failed to load. A message that no gamer likes to see, but we should put something in while we're doing the development anyway. I think that's it. We can basically test that out now. So if I go back to the map, hit play, create a bunch of things. So we've got some spheres over here, some blocks up towards the middle. If I then go Shift K, I think it was, we get that saved OK message up in the top left. Quit this, rerun it, and then Shift L should reload all those objects. There you go. We didn't save, you notice that ball was still moving when we haven't switched physics on these either. I'll go back and do that in a second, but notice when I saved, that ball was actually rolling, and now that we've reloaded it, it isn't. Well, first of all, because physics isn't enabled, but even if it was, we didn't save any information in here in the save game about the velocity of the object. All we saved is what class of object was it and how was it positioned, rotated, and scaled. You could, if you wanted to, add extra things to a player object detail struct, like anything you need really. So obvious stuff like velocity, but then anything specific to your game, like health remaining or has been damaged or whatever. To get this to work though, what we'll do, go back in the player controller and just say, when we're loading, after we've spawned an object, we will just set simulate physics on it again, like we do when we actually spawn them in the first place. So set simulate physics, run that into there, tick that, and then at least when we reload the objects, we should be able to shoot them around the place and they will have physics on. So let's hit play again. Let's go Shift L to load, and there you go. Right, so I think I'll leave it there. That's a simple example of how you would deal with the player being able to spawn objects which can then be loaded later on the next run. You will, in my example here, keep on overwriting the same save file. So if I just put a lot more things in, then go Shift K again, we get that saved OK. We've overwritten the same slot, so we'll have all of those objects there when we load. The other thing is, if I keep on pressing Shift L, it will keep on loading that same file over and over and over again and spawning more and more and more objects. So you might want something in place to stop the player from doing that. Except this looks pretty weird, doesn't it? Yeah, you might want something in place to make it so that this can't happen, like some Boolean variable to say that you've already loaded the objects, don't do it again. But anyway, yeah, that's how that works. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll see you later.